I too would like to just pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise that we're meeting here on our land tonight. Well, there's a lot that could be said, and much of it has been said, and there's a couple more people to follow, so I'm not going to be up here for actually very long. But I do want to just talk a little bit, of course, about our campaign, and also a bit of a pitch to why we are encouraging people to vote for us and why we are asking people to join our campaign and encourage others to support our campaign. Personally, I've been drawing quite a lot of inspiration from the fact that there's been a move globally in opposition to the austerity measures of the governments of the Western world. And we'd have to recognise that it began in Latin America back in 1989. Yeah, back in 1989 with the uprising in Venezuela against the austerity measures. So Latin America has been leading the way, but since the global financial crisis of 2008, it has been quite exciting to see that while there has been devastation to communities from this capitalist crisis, people have been organising together, sticking up for one another, solidarity with each other, and a wave of global movements of opposition to austerity in the Indignados movement, in the Occupy movement, and it started to shift into an organised political opposition to the neoliberal policies that we face here in Australia as well. So, you know, the Corbyn phenomenon in the UK, where there's a left-winger, a socialist leading the Labor Party, not something that you'd expect, not something that we can see here at the moment, unfortunately, where in the Democrats Party in the United States, there's a real contention, a socialist, or someone who says that he's a socialist, a bit different from our form of socialism, but all the same, a kind of socialist who is saying we need a revolution against the billionaire class. And that's definitely the message we need here as well. I think it is quite exciting to see that there are millions of people have been drawn to this this project against austerity. And we need to try to build that here, and that's our campaign, is to try to build that kind of a momentum. And now, it's also important, and I think we just innately do it, to recognise, okay, we're not the same as the US, we're not the same as the UK. We actually haven't had, luckily, we actually haven't had the same kind of social devastation, although that's not to say there is no social crisis here, but it hasn't been the same depth that's been occurring in other parts of the world, because we've been relatively cushioned by from that economic crisis. So we're a bit more like Canada, but even Canada has just very recently had a new project coalescing around a thing called the LEAP Manifesto, which is a manifesto for seriously tackling climate change and doing it in a socially just, progressive way. And that's starting to get legs. So even though we haven't had the same depth of the crisis as elsewhere, we're a bit more like Canada. There's certainly reason for us to hope for and build and have confidence in the potential for people here to want to stand up for an eco-socialist vision, which is what we're putting forward. Ours is a vision of the kind of world that, you know, we've talked about here already tonight, the kind of world that puts ecological repair at the centre of what we do, that puts women's liberation at the centre of what we do, that puts standing up for working people, for poor, for the Indigenous, for all the marginalised and dispossessed that make up the 99%, for putting us in the centre of society and putting the 1% and their billions, well, getting their billions into our hands so that we can do all the things that the 99% of us need. So ours is a message of recognising the need to bring the banks and the mines, the big key sectors of the economy, into public hands. Because you imagine if we had the investment power of Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank, Westpac, and who have I forgotten? Thank you.
ANZ.
If we had the four of them in public hands, the power of investment. At the moment, there are very important campaigns being waged by climate activists calling on all sorts of organisations, and recently the Doctors Reform Society divested from their very small account in one of the big four, and there have been calls for people to get their money out of the big banks because of the role that they play in investing in fossil fuels. But imagine if we could go a step beyond that to saying, well, let's have that investment power in public hands, democratically run. Think what we could do for environmental repair.
Yeah! Woo!
It's going to cost something in the ballpark of $37 billion a year for 10 years to convert Australia to entirely be our electricity grid be all 100% renewable energy. We need the money to be invested. An investment decision, like the investment decisions that are made about, you know, Adani coal or any of the other coal giants, the oil and gas industry, I mean, those investment decisions are too important to be left in the hands of the corporations that can only see dollar signs, that can only see profits. So it is time to have those investment decisions made by the community, made by the people, and so that we will be able to say, look, yes, of course, we're going to bend every effort to stop climate change from devastating the planet. Like, in our right minds, and we can be in our right minds because we don't just have the dollar signs in front of us. In our right minds, everyone in the planet would say, yeah, let's do what's going to save the coastlines, let's do what's going to prevent more wildfires like is going on in Canada right at the moment, let's do what it takes to stop more bushfires, let's do what it takes to stop the drought, let's do what it takes to bring down our carbon, our greenhouse gas emissions to a sustainable level, which is lower than they are now. It's about zero, and it's about drawing out carbon out of the atmosphere even below zero. So we've got a huge job in front of us to be able to have a sustainable environment, because that's only talking about climate change, which yes is about the worst thing that's facing us ecologically, but there are a whole lot of other elements of ecological repair that we need to engage in. So that's one of the things that a people's movement and a people's government, a government for the 99% would certainly do. We'd take the big investment decisions, would take the banks and their mighty economic power into public hands. We'd also tax the rich.
Yeah!
Came up with tax the rich for real, because there's on paper the super rich they get taxed, but when it comes down to it, there are so many loopholes in the, I don't know, thousands of pages of tax law. There are so many loopholes there that they get away with pretending that they don't make a profit, or they get away with just whittling away what their obligations are. And we know that there are 600 corporations that pay no tax, and then another whole bunch that pay 1 or 2% or less than 5% tax. When we're paying 30% tax or more, you know, so, and then it is more, we are paying more when you add in the GST on top of it. So we're paying a lot, and they're paying a little.
Fuck all.
Or nothing. Fuck all, exactly. They are paying.
Wait there, fight.
That word. Which I'll come back to later if you want. But there is so much that we can do to regenerate the environment that we need the investment power of the biggest corporations, and we need to bring the mines also into public hands so that we can make a transition away from fossil fuel. That's the only way we can guarantee that we can do it in a quick time frame that also has communities at their centre, that doesn't make the workers who currently work in these environmentally destructive jobs, doesn't make them pay the cost of the transition that we need to make. Because it's not the fault of people who are working in these industries, that these are polluting industries that need to go, they need to be closed down. So we need to make sure that the communities that rely on the jobs and the workers who rely on these jobs have a pathway to be supported in a transition to participate in clean energy jobs. And that we can make a transition that brings everyone with us. So that's one of the elements that we're campaigning for in our campaign. And I guess I wanted to refer to two others as well, which are our campaigns and our views, our vision for a society that has women's liberation at its centre. And of course, and we do think that it's critical that we know that we're facing a crisis in Australia with domestic violence. Intimate partner violence is responsible for taking too many women's lives, and you could say it's like the tip of the iceberg. It's the most obvious way that you can see that women are still oppressed in our society, and the reason I call it the tip of the tip of the iceberg is because there are a lot of other elements. Some of them are hidden, but we still have a gender pay gap that's substantial, and we still have expectations. I mean, if you count up, it's been the case for every time it gets reported. It's still the case that most of the unpaid work that is done in families is done by women, and that doesn't mean it all is, and that doesn't mean there are no men, sharing the burden at home or anything. Of course it doesn't. And there has been a transition in our society. There have been changes, but the burden of the unpaid work, unpaid caring, and just the burden of all the cleaning and cooking and all the rest of it, that is still carried by women, and we are in favour of a transition to making sure that there's equal pay, defending paid parental leave, and basically making it so that women's status is raised both by economic and by, say, consciousness raising or education, to make it impossible for anyone, to make it impossible in domestic relationships, in people's most close personal relationships, make it impossible for someone to think they own someone or they have control over someone so much that it's somehow okay to commit an act of violence towards them. That so we're very much in favour of pushing for a vision of a society where there is egalitarianism, and in this vein we're very, I think everyone knows, we've been very inspired by the developments in the Kurdish region of Rojava, where part of the revolution that's going on there is one that has women at the centre and includes women in every tier of government, every tier of administration, make sure that there is a role for women. And so I'm pleased to be able to stand as one of the women who are on our ticket, and I think it's part of the reason. I mean, we don't even always run women candidates, but we always aspire to make sure that whether our candidate is female or male, that we're going to stand up for women's rights, and so pushing for, you know, access to abortion, pushing for access to parity at work, and so forth. And the final thing I wanted to mention, and it will be brief, but it's just the importance of the campaign for refugees' rights. And some of the people here were at the vigil yesterday. That was basically, it was about commemorating those who have been killed or who have harmed themselves because of the Australian government's revolting, words found inhumane policy of offshore detention, mandatory detention, offshore processing, third country settlement. And these things are just, there's the moral aspect to them. They're outrageous, they make you angry. I know they make me very mad. They make you sad, they make you, all sorts of things about how they make us feel, to think that other human beings are being put in this situation. On top of that, they are also, these policies are poison for all of us, because those rights, like the right to seek asylum, is a right we all have. In international conventions, we haven't needed, the people, many of the people in this room, actually I won't say all because that's not true, but many of the people in this room haven't needed to seek asylum anywhere. We might have been born here in Australia or live here for whatever reason and haven't needed to seek asylum, but it is our right. And so the fact that people are being detained offshore, are being denied this right, that's our right too, that they're having violated. And of course, the other aspect of it is, if they could get away with violating our rights, we know what they would do to us. That we can see that they're quite willing to detain people indefinitely, they're quite willing to create conditions where people suffer from mental illness and are prepared to harm themselves in the most terrifying of ways. The Australian government, both Labor and Liberal policies, are offshore processing, third country settlement and mandatory detention. So Labor and Liberal both are responsible for this situation where people are treated like this, and they're doing it completely to scapegoat a vulnerable section of the international community, so that they can so they can draw attention away from their policies of austerity that are what underlies people's fear. What if we're flooded? What if we're overwhelmed? What if we can't have our social security? What if we can't have access to our hospitals and healthcare? That's the sort of underpinning social fear that is being diverted, instead of being channeled into a fight to say, well, we need all of these things. We need our healthcare, we need our hospitals, we need our schools and so forth. They're being diverted into we can't have all that, but at least we can keep the refugees out. And so for the Socialist Alliance, there is the moral imperative to stand up for refugees, and there's the moral questions of just simply defending the human rights. But we also recognise that by undermining the solidarity towards refugees, it undermines all solidarity in our society. Now, it does make it harder for us all to stick together with one another and insist that the 99% of us, those of us who are just ordinary, regular people, we we should be the ones who have a say over what affects us, and we should be the ones who are, you know, at the centre of public policy instead of being just that 1% who get off scot-free.
Yeah. Woo! Yeah.
That was pretty fun.
Just hand me a reminder.